NAMM 2020, I'm here on the booth of noise engineering, and these guys are engineering noise. We have not enough noise here, so but you are engineering the good noise, the proper noise. I'm here with Marcus, Kris, and Anchor. What are your roles in the company?
So I do pre-production testing. I basically break the stuff before it comes out.
I do the hardware development.
I help with firmware and software development.
So you are doing these very strange designs, a bit more experimental way. Yeah.
More or less. I do most of the circuitry layout. I do all of the PCB layout. It's sort of a joint effort. Well, I'll do a general layout of what we think it should look like, and then we fight it out, generally over beer.
And how many are you in the company in noise engineering? So it's already a bigger company, or?
There are 4 of us total, so this is 3/4 of the company.
Oh, so near. And the last one is a dog or a cat?
Well, I didn't count them. We do have 2 dogs in the company too. The last one is my husband, Steven. He does more of the firmware.
Okay. From which background you're coming? You were already in a synth company, or is it your first synth company?
This is our first synth company. My husband started this a few years before I joined. He had a background in audio programming. My background, I was a biology professor before this, so I had no idea what I was getting into.
Noise engineering is, when I look at the modules, they are not that typical bread and butter things. They are very experimental. From where you take your ideas? Is this, do you have very experimental designs? Or?
We get ideas a lot of places. We try to come up with ideas of things that we're interested in, things that we want as a company, things that we think are missing from our cases. Sometimes it's users, sometimes friends or users that are just to say, hey, I really need this, or I really think this would be a cool module. The Mana Ceteratas was friend Matt Lang came to us and said, I really like the Basimila Ceteratas, but I want it to be more hardcore, more badass, and so that's what we did.
You have, I think, a selection of analog stuff and digital, or? What do you? What is your more in analog or digital? What do you prefer?
Well, I don't program, so I prefer analog, personally. But as a company, we just go with whatever makes sense for the module. If it's better as an analog module, then we'll make it an analog. Some things are just going to be better, more cost-effective, smaller, better, shorter, smaller HP in digital. We'll do it in digital. If we think it's going to be a better module in digital, we'll do it in digital. If we think it makes more sense in analog, we'll do it in analog.
And how do you decide for making a module? Is this based on customer feedback you get from the huge Eurorack community, or is it more your own ideas you want to realize in a Eurorack module?
We generally have at least 20 things in the pipeline that we're working on at any given time. Not all of them actually become modules. So a lot of things we start off as, okay, this seems like a really cool idea, and then we'll work on it on paper. Sometimes if it's a digital module, we'll prototype it in software first and say, oh shit, that sucks, let's not do that. Sometimes we'll do it in hardware, we'll get it and say the first version, you can even see it here. This is the first version of the Pura Ruina, which is one of our distortions. We made that, we were very excited about the idea. We got it and we're like, wow, there's a really cool idea here, but this is definitely not it. So we went back to the drawing board. So whether it becomes a module or not really just comes down to whether once we have the idea, we fight it out, we decide whether we think it's a good idea. Once we get it, we decide whether we still think it's a good idea or not. Sometimes it isn't. And then we look at the price. Can we sell it? Can we make this for a cost-effective, compelling price to the consumer?
But realizing such modules, it's that you get head a crush when all these want to release everything you want in a module. So you need to strip it down to features, and you can't put every idea in one module. So how do you design a module? Is this more performance oriented, or you think more sound design oriented? What is your philosophy of a company?
We tried to decide early on. Would you agree?
Yeah.
We tried to decide early on what we want the feature set to be. And we decide that as a group. We have a meeting every Friday where we talk about what we want to put into production. Usually with beer, we just sit down and say, okay, what's next? What do we think the feature should be? What makes this compelling? What makes this different from anything else that's out there? What's the noise engineering take on this module? Why is this a compelling module? We tend to make things that are more live performance oriented, but if we're making things that are sound, like the L'Aquila Cateritas was designed for sound designers specifically. Lots of people tend to like it, but when that was made, the idea was for sound design.
So I think your modules attract not the people who are searching the loveliest piano sound, but more the harsh or more the bit more the distorted stuff, right? It's more the hard part, not the clearest part.
I think we do have a reputation for being a bit more harsh or more techno-oriented, which I think is a little bit unfortunate, because I think even with the Manus, which is a pretty aggressive, or the Ataraxic Cateritas, they're both pretty aggressive oscillators, but you can dial them in and get some really pretty, beautiful sounds out of them. So that's what we're known for, but I don't think it's really all we do. If you go to the Cursus Cateritas, it's just sonically a really beautiful module, and it's one of my favorites for that reason. It's just very, very pretty. So yeah, I agree. That's what we're really, people think of us for, but I hope that we can change that coming up.
It's often if we talk about dirty or distort, it comes to 8-bit or 16-bit or what. I think your modules doesn't go in this direction, right? It has more an own character.
You want to talk about that, Marcus?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question. What was the...
Normally, if you go in the direction of more dirty, more harsh stuff, you end it in the 8-bit section or 16-bit section. I think your designs or your sound is not really 8-bit-ish or...
Sure. I mean, it all depends on what you mean by dirty. I mean, square waves can sound a certain way, but if you FM two square waves together, you're going to get something really weird. But if you FM two sines together in an inharmonic ratio, you're going to get something that sounds really distorted anyway. We have a whole line of distortion modules. If you run a sine wave into any of them, they'll be really weird. I wrote a blog post all about that where I ran all of them in series and started with a sine wave, and I didn't end up with a sine wave. So it's more about your end goal and kind of working backwards. So if you have one of our modules, you can probably make it sound really dirty if you want to, but you can also make it sound really nice.
I have some eye always on your modules, and when I see this can add some interesting character to a simple module, like a simple oscillator with square and sound. If you add something like your wave shapers to it, I think it can be very versatile. Is that your idea, to add the people a different character to the modules?
It's one of the reasons that I like to use our stuff, but I think our stuff tends to work really well together. One of our goals, though, is to always understand that almost nobody has a full noise engineering system. So we like to make things that work well with other people's modules too. And so that's not to necessarily say that other people's things need character shaping, but I want to make modules that sound good with lots of other people's modules.
And how long does it take to develop such a module? Is 1 year or more?
It varies a lot. Some of the modules will sit on for... We have a couple of modules that are problem children that have been in development for years and years. We have one module that's currently on hardware revision 42. There have not been 42 builds of it, but we continually revise what we think we want it to be. It's a problem child. And we've had others that have been from idea. Stephen and I sat down one day and said, this is a really cool idea. We should do this. I went back, I designed the schematic, I laid out the PCB. It was out and it was in production within 3 months. So it's really variable.
You need to make a stop at some point and say, it's fine. We need to go out. And otherwise it's endless loop, repeating and repeating and repeating. You probably see it also, Eurorack is booming. There are tons of modules, I think over 200 module developers only on modular grid. How this ends, or how we are at a point of saturation already. What is the next step in Eurorack? You think more that special modules, or because bread and butter, 33, 40 chips oscillators are tons on the market, more ladder filters or other filters. What is the next thing?
I don't know. Part of me hopes that it'll be part of the democratization of Eurorack, so that there's a lot more space for people to get into it. I have no idea what's going to be next. I think we're seeing more of a shift towards stereo stuff. We're doing stereo, but we're certainly not the only ones. I think there's still lots of room for individual ideas, and what those individual ideas that are the next big thing, I have no idea. Marcus has a really good idea of what's really coming out on the market each month, so maybe you have ideas.
The reality is that there's a lot of common ideas within synthesis that have been evolving for 50 years now. If you get a Maths and you get a double Andre from Harvestman, they're going to be very different modules, even though they're both function generators. People releasing their own takes on things is something that's been happening for a while and will continue to happen, so there'll always be new interpretations of old ideas. There's also a lot more people performing with modular now, and different performance tools and performance strategies are continuing to evolve. We have a lot of performance-oriented utilities, and that's been some of what we're known for. So I think there's going to be more of that, and as things become cheaper and as DIY becomes more common, like Kris was saying,
NAMM doesn't love us. They close now. It's already ending out, and I think my cameraman Patrick is already a bit quiet. It's already it's fine. Okay, for NAMM you had also some modules. Quick.
So we have 3 modules that we've unveiled at NAMM. One of them is a MIDI to CV converter with 8 CV outs that you can configure to respond to any kind of MIDI behaviors that you want. The other one's a stereo oscillator. We're going to make alternate oscillator programs available to load onto that oscillator after it's released. And the last one is a reverb stereo platform.
Okay.
Yep.
And when we can expect these modules?
We don't have a date yet or prices. They're still prototypes. We're hoping to get them out in the next few months, and we will be announcing it as soon as we have them.
And that's the voice of the NAMM show. Big thanks for this interview, Noise Engineering. I wish you good luck. I wish that the modules will coming this year. And I wish you also a good NAMM 2020, because tomorrow is the last day, probably the most hardest one, because then everybody is near sleeping. Me too. Big thanks, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and leave me comments below if you have a question. Big thanks for watching. Bye. Thank you.